briefing is how to push through the parliament the draft law on cleansing the authorities. And we will have some presenters, and there will be Sergei Sobolev, Batkivshina Party, then Yevro Sobolev, a member of Social Initiative Vola, head of Civic Illustration Committee. Lestrakovsky, deputy from Svoboda faction, Vitaly Klitschko, who will join us a little bit later. And he's the mayor of Kiev, and Pavlo Petrenko, Minister of Justice of Ukraine.
Who is the head of the Civic Illustration Committee, Osokovsky Oleg, member of Parliament, Svoboda Party, Vitaly Klitschko, who will join us a little bit later, the mayor of Kiev, and Pavlo Petrenko, the Minister of Justice of Ukraine.
Friends, thank you for coming. This is awfully important and an important moment for us to have cleaning in Ukraine. I ask journalists to understand this, that these forces of the coalition stepped over the political egoism and the national wish of every politician to have their own law, and they united again around one law on cleaning the authorities, the politics. Sergei Sobolev, leader of Batkivshina faction, he signed that draft law. Oleg Sukovsky, representative of faction of Svoboda, and you know that party stands for cleaning this in Ukraine, and he signed it. Oleg Technibok, he was supposed to come, but because he is ill, he has not come. Mayor of Kiev is late, but we have 3 signatures from his party under this draft law, and the Minister of Justice, Pavlo Petrenko, will make a very good announcement. This is the day when the majority after Maidan is ready to support the law for purging Ukrainian authorities. And the ideas in this law, they unite us together. We suggest to examine all the judges, all public servants, and during this examination to take away 5 categories of people. The first category, leaders of communist and Komsomol's organizations of the Soviet Union. Like Alexander Yefremov, we can understand how difficult this issue is for Ukraine. The second decision, let's welcome Vitaly Klitschko, who joined us. Once again, it's a pleasure that other party and the faction supports this law of purging our government and our authorities. The second category, all who related with KGB, and this difficult war. During this, a lot of information about betrayers and about disrupted operations that our soldiers get into traps all the time. It shows how big is the problem is of KGB in our country, and it was a big mistake that we didn't do like in Czech Republic. The WHO, after they came, Maslov came to power, they closed the service and they started to build it from anew. It's time to clean it, and then The third issue, we're united from the time of Maidan. All the people who were holding managerial positions and who did not say they didn't pass the main test, and it's very dangerous to keep these people in power. The fourth category, because of these problems we have at present, and the main problem of Ukraine is attack of Russia. All people who in word or action supported efforts to take part of Ukrainian territory. It means absolutely clear that these people don't want Ukraine and they should not be in power. And the fourth main idea of the law, the most dangerous test, especially for judges, prosecutors, and officers of police and many top public services, to explain the property, their property and property of people of their family. So judges whose mothers who are 84 years old have tens of companies, and prosecutors whose wives have fancy cars and houses that European millionaires could envy them. All the people who cannot explain their property, the assets through this law, we suggest to take them to get rid of them. Now I'd like to give the floor to people, and the approval of this law depends on them, and then there will be a surprise from the government. Let's start with Vitaly. Thank you very much. I apologize. I will not be able to be here during the whole press conference. I have lots of work to do in the office. We have to deal with many things, but I would like to ask every one of you that purging and renovation of power, that was the main requirement of the revolution of dignity. People came to the streets, they didn't want to wait any longer. That's why at present we, with our political party, we decided to create all constitutional conditions for to hold all the parliamentary elections, and we need to recharge all the power, all the authorities. We have the new president, new mayor, we have new city council of Kiev, and we must have a new parliament, and we must go through new elections to local authorities. But purging should take place not only on the level of legislation, it should take place on all the levels of authorities of the government. And our political party joined project committee, and we participate in development the draft law, and I'm sure that these criteria should be realized, should be implemented, not waiting until this law. I call the President Committee to start working and to examine staff policy in the city administration of Kiev. And I would like to tell you, without waiting, during the process of dismissal, six managerial managers and 16 community companies, leaders of community companies, will be dismissed, and many public servants they catch with their teeth at their positions, and they find lots of reasons to stay on the position. They take a sick leave, or they. But we started this process, and we will the process of purging will continue it until the end. Thank you. I would like to underline that this is one more law, which will be draft law, which will be regulate a whole layer of relations related to purging. That's why it's very important to consider all these issues together. There will be a very important campaign if we run this campaign along the old electoral system, the system which brought to the parliament Pshonka, children of Azarov and children of Yanukovych. In fact, I doubt anything will change in the country. If we have in majority districts, we have a competition between money, competition of who will bribe better, and there should be a vote for political platforms of candidates. So the first process of purging, which should start begin in the parliament, we should approve the new election law, and it should be a proportional election law, when every citizen can purge someone who doesn't deserve to represent their interest in the parliament. The same situation with local elections, local councils, because again there is the law according to which 50% of all local authorities, local councils, are elected on the basis of a majoritarian electoral system. And even now, the elections that took place in Kiev, from all that the Timo Chernovetsky was trying to get to the positions, and rich people, and they represent as if residents of Kiev in the new Kiev City Council. That's proof that purging is possible on the basis of a clear law. That's why the returning to the proportional election system on the local level, that's very important. And let's remember that we have a whole category of people who will participate in these elections because according to this legislation, there is no decisions of courts in force. So if we keep this election law to the parliament, I will not be surprised in majoritarian districts, as somewhere in Luhansk region or Donetsk region, we will see Yanukovych, Azarov, Pshonka, Kluyev, brothers Klus, Levishka, Firtash, and many others, who will state that they have complete basis to run for the parliament and to local authorities. That's why our colleagues have brought one more draft law which will support this law. It's deseparatization of the society. There will be a direct profession, not for a profession, but for political activity, but to people who were involved to financing, to support and organizing separatist movements, for financing terrorism, and that draft law should be adopted. In addition to that, it's very important to summarize what happens to purging in the framework of during the last months. I would like to emphasize that the Batькivщина party, we began that process in 2010, when from 2010 to 2014, for cooperation with the regime of Yanukovych, for violation of ethics for the statute of the party, we excluded 1,500 of party members, and everybody should start within his own political party to look into the eyes of people honestly. That's why when I signed on behalf of Batькivщина faction, that's a position of 84 MPs from Batькivщина faction, I consciously signed it, the draft law, to make it impossible after the revolution of dignity to prevent those facts which we observe. When the state management of is run by Chernovetsky, a person who organized a lot of deals with property of Kiev's property in Kiev, when everything is agreed with Mr. Younger Pshonka, because that is his official assistant and consultant. Could anyone imagine that on the 21st and 22nd of February, that official assistant of Pshonka in 4 months would be appointed to run as a manager, deputy manager of the state? That's a line. When there are candidates who were connected to Yuri Yanakivsky, Artem Pshonka, and corruption schemes of Alexander Yanukovych. So they are candidates to be appointed for governors. And this purging should be not only should depend on conscience of people who organize it, but also it should be according to the law. These people should not have even right to campaign for those top officials they hold it now. And for the purging of Persian among MPs. We should also do everything possible for those MPs not to be in politics. They can do anything else, and that's why this draft law that will be a final point, and that for us, not our courts, not our prosecutions, and local self-governance, and this the system, state system of power management should not have people who belong to those requirements which were requirements that were read by my colleague Sobolev. Our faction will support this draft law together with ratification and session, the law on sanctions against the Russian Federation because of the war against Ukraine, the law, the draft law that regulates prosecution and many other things. This is the most important draft law, and the parliament cannot be dismissed, run for the election without adoption of this law.
Thank you very much. I would like to greet the community here, the journalists. Indeed, we had on numerous occasions our chance to do the purging in Ukraine for the first time in 1991. Then that wasn't exercised, but then that was done by the Baltic states, Czech Republic, Poland, Slovakia, and accordingly they have the outcome of that, and they have no corruption, they have no agents of KGB, like we unfortunately have now. The second chance we had in 2005 after the Orange Revolution. Oleg Ternibok, leader of Svoboda party and faction, then submitted to the parliament the Persian draft. It wasn't supported then. Well, had it been supported, we wouldn't have had the Yanukovych regime and the criminals that usurped power and persecuted Ukrainians, killed Ukrainians, and accordingly, now we also have the draft on purging 4570. It wasn't supported by the parliament, and now we have this accommodated draft on cleansing of power, and this is based on our draft of 4570. It's about 70% of the old draft. It's taken from them, and all the rascals, all the corrupt people who served the Yanukovych regime, who usurped power, destroyed Ukrainian economy and army, they all have to be purged, not just purged, but also they have to be made liable for the criminal liability, and Svoboda Party and faction will do everything humanly possible to get this law through the parliament successfully. Thank you very much. And now the announced surprise from the Ukrainian government. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. In fact, over this period of 23 years of our newly gained independence, Ukraine followed the path that had no chances to get rid of the communist legacy after the announcement of independence. The primary reforms were exercised by former representatives of the Communist Party. At a later stage, Komsomol leaders joined in, and they created the state apparatus that was self-sufficient and self-sustainable, but it wasn't capable of effective reforms, wasn't capable to conduct removal of red tapes and fight corruption. For that matter, one of the reasons why the revolution and the events took place in the Maidan was desire of our citizens to change the system that was built up without their will. Constant lies from the politicians that would come to parliament, promise reforms, combating corruption, but there was no sign of such processes, in fact. So the Prime Minister's and the government's position is very clear. Presently, when Ukraine is facing challenges of external aggression, war, enormous problems in the economy, The state apparatus should consist of those people motivated, new faces, professional, and patriotic at that. Now we have 250,000 functionaries in our state apparatus. Their efficiency, if we compare them even with the private sector, is very low, is minimal, in fact. So the Prime Minister announced this very clear-cut statement. Full cleaning of the state apparatus and re-attestation. First of all, an inspection, enforcement, and judicial bodies. The judicial system is a specific emphasis. We analyze experience of the predecessors in Eastern Europe, and those that failed to change the composition of judges after the USSR disintegration were lagging behind. Otherwise, countries went through reforms, joined the EU, and became fully members of the European community. So the Ukrainian government and the Illustration Committee jointly submitted the law on purging. That was about rotation of all the judicial body of judges, and then it was rejected. Now we can see how they performed, how they delivered over the last 6 months, not just economic issues, but also decisions with the support of separatists, terrorists, that are now raging in the east. So opposition is clear-cut, full rotation in the state apparatus, control, inspection, judiciary, through the processes of, first of all, this income and asset check. They cannot be poor and have the warm circle of people who would be envied by Rockefeller and Trump. And also cutting of the number of civil servants. The Prime Minister announced that that was about 35 to 50%. And the last but not least, maybe the most important, we have to be honest with our citizens. They cannot be effective officials if they have to perform things with 1,200 hryvnias for a salary. With this kind of salary, they cannot provide for their families, and this is forced income-based corruption. So we have to preserve the same payroll. So all those people who will be merit-based competitors and who would come to the positions will have more realistic salaries. And the fourth thing is the deregulation, and as much as we can. So without any waiting for the law, the government adopted a whole set of decisions. This moratorium on inspections of all sorts. And in Ukraine, we have about 80 of them. And it's not just functions, it's anything, anybody, and round the clock, all year long. So by the end of this year, we will impose moratorium, the moratorium on inspections and checks on behalf of such bodies. The fifth position is that at maximum we have to reduce the control functions of the state, and the sixth, delegation of powers to local authorities. And here I would like to discuss it specifically. The President of Ukraine launched purging of the parliament through this snap election procedure, because only our public can identify those people who deserve being on the parliament. This current parliament is incapable of reforms demanded by the society. And another point, in order to delegate big powers to local authorities, we also need people who represent real community interests. So the law on local elections is impossible to tolerate. Last local elections were criticized by all international monitors and organizations. So it should be all reset through snap elections at all levels. We need elected officials, elected representatives at the local governments level, in the parliament, and competitive functionaries and the apparatus that will be willing and will deserve this right to represent Ukraine at the international level, to fight corruption, to have the qualification, the talent, and the professional means. So finally, the position is very clear. Ukraine has no other way but to rectify its mistakes of quarter of a century, and there's no other way. There's no ideal point. There are no ideal reforms. The only ideal point for reforms is the point we are in now, and we have to be expedient and effective. And this can be done only by those people who will come to the civil service as new entrants.
I will be very brief. I would like to draw your attention that this is one of the steps, one of the activities to prepare to approval in the parliament and the draft law, and we hope that it will pass the parliament. And on the 9th of August, this week, there will be a big meeting. I hope that you journalists will find an opportunity to deliver to the society our messages, that our message that we need to come out, and we should need to show to the parliament that this draft law on purging, it's not just a whim of a small group of people, that is a demand of time of the society, and we hope that that meeting will be a big one. That's the first point. The second one, I believe that all of us, and I hope I rely on your assistance, will try to deliver to the society, and we know that there is a campaign. We need to deliver one message. Politicians are allowed to speak about patriotism. They're allowed to speak about dedication to our ideas of Maidan. We know why quite well that not always they do what they declare. That's why I believe that one of the main, if not the main criteria of assessment of any politician for the next elections, it will be how they support or not support this draft law. That will be a sign. To speak is one thing, but it's important how they examine. They will examine their colleagues. So we hope that you will also support us on this issue. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that in addition to the end of war in the East, there is no other more important issue than this, purging the authorities, the power. Thank you very much for good news, and now we'll have questions because Minister Petrenko has not enough of time. So the first questions will be to him. Please. Tell me, please, when that draft law will be in the parliament. The draft law should be considered as soon as possible by this parliament, and I completely agree with Karl. It will be one of the tests for those MPs in the parliament, how ready they are for purging and for examination of themselves and of their colleagues, and it will be a very good sign for our people for elections. If this parliament doesn't vote for that law, for this law, one of the first decisions of the newly elected parliament should be to pass and to consider and to approve this law in the new parliament. And it's very important. The position of people, of journalists, is very important, and NGOs is very important in this process. According to, you believe that you want to purge people who were under Yanukovych or under Soviet, in Soviet times were leaders in communist and communist Komsomol organizations. What about Mr. Poroshenko, who was among the founders of the Party of Regions and who held positions under Yanukovych, and also the same with Mr. Turchinov, who held some positions in Soviet times? Our position is very clear. First of all, we speak about state public servants. And there are two segments of purging: professional and property. And the problem Ukrainian government is facing is when reforms and orders we give to public servants in ministries and agencies and in regional administrations, district administrations, they are against. And public servants, who they work a lot for many years, and they have a certain immunity to any change. They are not motivated to run reforms, so they are not motivated to change, so they have no motivation to work for results. That's why the government outlined clearly what should be reformed. We need to have competitive, motivated, and professional state apparatus. Through tests, through check, through property check, and through open competition, and also through involvement new people who have very good education, maybe no experience, but who want and who are motivated to work in the new system of state administration. Without public administration, without that, systemic reforms through the country will not work, or it will be very difficult to run the reforms. The second segment, reforms in the prosecution and courts and law enforcement bodies. There is also a Soviet principle, repressive principle. You know the level of trust of our citizens to courts, several percent. Our citizens are afraid to go to courts, and they understand that there could be no fair decision, that the court will not defend their rights, and that they will face lots of bureaucracy, and they will have to be involved in corruption. So the second segment, in addition to property test, and we need to pass new laws related to reforms in court system and judiciary and police. Those are priorities for us, to pass a new law on judiciary and the new law on police, or the law on prosecution. Without these systemic reforms, the country is not competitive, will not be competitive in the world. It will be very difficult to the country to react to external challenges we are facing. And it's not only about the war with Russia, it's about economic competition under these, in this very difficult world, and there is still an economic crisis in the world. So these issues are of primary importance for us, and we are ready to cooperate, to work with MPs if they're ready to pass such laws on purging and renovation, and the same with civic society.
Добре, оскільки пан міністр спішить, думаю, ще одне запитання пан міністру і потім.
Козаченко Тетяна, адвокат, скажіть, будь ласка, які кроки ви особисто готові зробити зараз для того, щоб провести цю перевірку?
What are you ready
в міністерстві? Що
to
для
do
цього робиться? І коли це буде зроблено? Ви можете бути
in your own
вже зараз.
ministry? Thank you for your question. You know, when I was appointed the minister, I faced several things. Very quiet bureaucratic machine, which is working as if working. And on the third day, I learned that there is a reception of the Minister of Justice, and I asked them who does that. Main specialist, heads of the departments received citizens, not the minister. And that the first thing I did, every 2 weeks, I receive citizens, and I watched all deputy ministers to receive people in Kyiv and all over the country, without warning regional departments of justice, or the Ministry of Justice. Second thing I did when I brought together our representatives from regional level, I asked them to pass a voluntary test. There were a lot of people, very experienced people. I asked them to pass voluntarily a test for professional competence. And the test for the fourth year of the university, the result among 89 people, 40 passed the test with very bad marks, and they were dismissed. These things are not in the law, but we started to work in the Ministry of Justice. There are lots of problems on different levels. Our staff is huge, but without such steps, purging is impossible. For that purging to be systemic, we need to pass the draft law, and it should take place. This process should take place in all the ministries and agencies. I worked in a structure before, and I know how the structure works. I worked 8 years in the ministry. Why you emphasize that you are purging your ministry, but on the regional level, there are chiefs. There are a lot of people who were under Yanukovych, under previous regime, etc. They still continue working. What's the problem? Why don't you purge chiefs of regional departments of the Ministry of Justice? Thank you for your question. 40 people were dismissed from different departments, about 80 managers of different levels, registration service, they were arrested by police, because from March we have an anti-corruption program. We provide all information to the securities, so we send to the Ministry of Interior on those facts we have. But the disease is so deep in the system that for a minister to replace people We need to hire new people. We have about 2,000 vacancies, but the salaries are 1,700. People don't come even for the competition, and because they understand it's impossible to live for such money. And there are some heads of on the regional level. They're trying. They take a sick leave, and they're waiting for the Minister of Justice to be replaced. We will handle this situation too. About Poroshenko, look at the idea of the law. The law means that we should test all public servants, all police, all prosecutors, all the judges. And here's the order. The first National Agency on States Public Service. They should pass the test. They are represented, they have their offices in every region, and then there is no need to start from the very beginning. After we clean it, that agency on regional service they start checking all the rest, all the bodies. The law says clearly the minister, his deputies, then the regional level, and all the rest will have to go through the test. If we take away leaders of corruption, the parliament will fall down, will collapse, and new people will help to clean the system. As to the president and all elected officials, the law, according to recommendation of the Council of Europe, divided all the positions into 2 categories and appointed people like SBU, prosecutors, judges, public servants. If they don't pass a test, they are dismissed and they're prohibited to hold a position for 10 years. If representatives, if elected officials don't pass the test, then we announce that we give that information to voters. European Union, the Council of Europe, in the special resolution, they are against with the law of purging. We should not limit people to elect and to be elected. There is a special legislation, and that is about separatism. There is a criminal legislation which prohibits some people to be elected. But purging, we will not be allowed by European partners to take positions from people who are elected. And they were told us that we could put that into the law, but these people would win through European Court on Human Rights. As to the President of Ukraine, honestly, in the first draft of the law, there was such a paragraph that all, without exception, together with the president, would go through the test. And when we discussed it with different parties in the parliament for us to how to unite around one draft law from Udar, they told they would sign that draft law under the condition that the presidential position will be taken from the list, Persian list. The motivation was he's an elected leader of the country, newly elected. That's why to purge him, it's not just ethical. It's not ethical, and it's not fair. It's not. You see, it's not important. It's you can write a good law, but it may not work, and it's important to find agreement with. We excluded the position of the president from the list of those who were purged. All the rest started with ministers and down to policemen or representatives from district administrations. All of them should go through a test. Also, we should example. Ministry of Defense, and that's a big challenge, and we pay by hundreds of lives of our people. all will be examined. But if someone who doesn't go through the purging examination, the conferences, they will not be dismissed from the position. Elected officials, we will inform voters about that. Like in Poland, who check candidates for deputies according to this law. All who run to the parliament should be tested for purging criteria. And if they don't pass that test, on the website of the Central Election Commission, there should be an understanding that such a candidate did not pass such and such criteria, doesn't meet such a criteria, and then voters decide whether they wanted to elect someone who supports terrorism and separatist or KGB representative. More questions. I would like to add that it will not be easy to pass this draft law because 4570 draft law was not even on the agenda, and we asked why don't you vote? You know what MPs told us? They also, according to the law 4570, they have to go through the purging procedure, and more than half of the parliament will have to go through this procedure. And voters should purge, and they should elect those people who can defend interests of Ukrainians. We are very pleased that the program of protection of Ukrainians is under implementation, and at the base of this draft law is the draft law of Svoboda Party. And probably the last question. You just told that the process of adoption will be difficult in the parliament because MPs are the first who will be purged. You represent two political parties here. Do you guarantee? Can you confirm? Can you confirm that your MPs will vote for this draft law? And the second part of the question, will there be consultations or negotiations with the MPs from other political parties? No doubt. We need to hold a consultation with all the MPs because the chance for any draft law to be to pass is the chance is very small. So this is a decisive time for us, and the key issue for us is one of the key issues for us is the issue of purging. That's why the agenda should be developed in a way that such key issues as the law on purging, the law on prosecution, it's in the second reading for 2 months. All paragraphs were agreed, but they didn't come to the parliament. Then a regulation for association agreement to be brought to ratification. These are two laws, the laws on anti-corruption activity, and when we open registers and the draft laws which were not approved before, the draft laws on sanctions against Russian Federation, because in this law there are also judges, and we found out judges approved decisions for the benefit of Russian banks. And they destroy Ukrainian enterprises in such a way they protect all those who finance separatism as terrorism. So this list, we suggest to bring 9 issues on the agenda. There will be a press conference on Friday, and this issue will be on the top of the list, and we'll vote for it. Thank you. Thank you very much for interest in, and I will wish you success because elections it's the best purging and the best tool for purging. If the law is not passed, then information for voters you will be able to publish it before. Let's forget representatives of political parties that did their job. We got united around one draft law. Now A big request to people, all who are not on the front, not in the hospital. This Saturday at 12 o'clock, we get together around the parliament, and we will show that all Ukraine demands urgent vote for purging of the authorities. That will happen. It happened with the law on judges, and let's continue working in that fashion. Thank you.